Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Cafecito with ILLCF from Advocacy to Impact Latinas Leading in Law, Policy, and Power. My name is Elizabeth Liz Villarreal, and I'm a proud alumna of ILLCF. I received a scholarship in 2005, and I'm also the chair of the Alumni Association Board Leadership and Development Committee. It's a pleasure to see you all here today. But before we begin, a few quick reminders. Please keep your microphones muted unless you are speaking. Please stay engaged and take notes if you'd like. We will have audience questions at the end. Please be respectful of all speakers and to each other. And we hope today inspires you and helps you to see your own path in law, policy, and public service. With that, I'm happy to turn it over to our moderator, Felix Giron.
Thank you so much, Liz, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felix Giron, and I'm currently a law student here at the University of Illinois Chicago School of Law. I am a 2025 ILLCF scholarship recipient and a member of the ILLCF Alumni Association Board, serving in the Leadership and Development Committee under Liz. It is an honor to moderate and host this conversation as someone navigating the same path. I see today's panel as more than just a discussion. It is lived experience, mentorship, and a roadmap for impact. We are honored to be joined by an extraordinary group of Latina leaders who are all JD holders and members of the ILCF Foundation Board, shaping law and policy in Illinois. I would love to open it up over to our panelists so they can introduce themselves, starting with the Honorable Evadina Delgado, State Representative for the Illinois 3rd District.
Good afternoon, everyone. Evadina Delgado, State Rep 3rd District. That area, the 3rd District actually is the northwest side of Chicago. It includes neighborhoods like Wicker Park, Logan Square, and Belmont-Cragen, and including a few others. So excited to be here. I am an attorney by trade, but I have always worked on the front end of the law. I like to say that we're the ones that draft and create the law, and there are attorneys that work on the other side of the law, arguing it in front of judges. So I have been lucky to be practicing in that area of the law since I graduated in 2003. And now I get to actually be a member of the legislature who debates this policy and actually gets to real substantive change. So I'm very excited to be here, Felix. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. Jennifer Crespo, General Counsel for the Illinois Torture Inquiry and Relief Commission.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to our moderator, all my very much esteemed fellow panelists. It's pretty cool to be on a panel with all of you. I am the board designee for State Representative Fred Crespo. There is a relation. He's my dad. I have been with the Torture Inquiry and Relief Commission for about 4 years now. Prior to that, I litigated consumer fraud cases for the state of Illinois as an assistant attorney general. Prior to that, I did immigration law, a lot of asylum cases. Most of my clients were from Arabic-speaking countries like Syria and Palestine. I am a alum of UIC Law School. So Felix, great choice. I think it's the best one out there. I'm so happy to be here today to talk to all of you and hear the stories of my fellow panelists as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Maria Martinez, Director and Counsel for Kroc, Fairchild, Duarte, and Beres.
Thank you, Felix. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to you, Felix, Liz, and the foundation for putting this together. My name is Maria Virginia Martinez, and I have been practicing since 2018. My career began in the legislature and continues to be in the legislature. I am a practicing attorney. I have worked at 3 different levels of government, at the state, Cook County, and at the city. That was my most recent job, working as intergovernmental affairs under Mayor Lori Lightfoot, representing the city down in Springfield. And now I'm in private practice, both under a law firm and a lobbying arm, where I get to practice regulatory law, and as Representative Delgado mentioned, being at the front end of the lawmaking process. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much, Counselor. And then Lilia Rivera, Commissioner for the Illinois Commission on Equity and Inclusion.
Hi to everyone. It is truly an honor to be here with everyone today. I proudly serve as Commissioner for the Commission on Equity and Inclusion. By trade, again, I am an attorney. I attended the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign and went to DePaul Law for my law degree. I have about over 20 years of experience, 10 of which are in public service. I've worked across all governments, from local government to the city to the state. And I have also worked in such institutions as the City of Chicago, the Illinois Department of Central Management Services, and as well as the Office of Lieutenant Governor. And those experiences really shaped how I view government. And it's not just that it's a system, but it's also that it is a place for us to leverage with intention and expand opportunities and access for everybody. As a commissioner for the Commission on Equity and Inclusion, we create opportunities in the space of procurement, specifically supplier diversity in the public arena. And by what we do is that we open doors for businesses and we build pathways for communities that have been historically marginalized. And just one more thing. My journey in public service has been really incredible, and I really welcome today's discussion and look forward to everything that we have going on today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And then we also have the Honorable Lilian Jimenez, State Representative for the Illinois 4th District.
Hi, everyone. Lilian Jimenez, State Representative for the 4th District, which is West Town, Ukrainian Village, Humboldt Park, and parts of Hermosa and Belmont-Cragen that I share with Representative Delgado. I come to this work from an advocacy perspective and a civil rights lens. I spent many years before going to law school in social services, union organizing, and at the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. So I like to think of the lawmaking through that perspective. I won't go too deep in because I know we have a lot of questions, but I've also spent time at the state of Illinois trying to do civil rights work from inside government agencies. So look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Representative. Each of these leaders represent a distinct path, but they are united by a shared commitment to justice, equity, and public service. We'll start with a question for each panelist and open up for the rest of the panel after their answer. But with that said, let's begin with our questions. Our first section speaks about origin and identity. Representative Jimenez, looking beyond your title, what was the defining moment that made you realize law or public service was your path for impact?
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful question. Looking forward to hearing from others about it as well. I had a chance to think about it, and it's difficult to mention one moment. As I mentioned, working in social services and Latino civil rights, specifically around immigration, was probably one of the defining moments for myself when my mom received her deportation order as I was working for a social service organization that was helping immigrants within the settlement house movement. I was working at Erie House and Association House, both because I needed 2 jobs to pay my rent. So I was 1.5 jobs. So I know the life of working in social services and how low paid it can be. But in that moment, also receiving my mom's deportation order made it clear to me that the work that I was doing was important, but that there was space and room to do so much more. And so I started the path to start to go to law school. I ended up going to DePaul Law School, focused on social services, focused on public interest. I did, immigration practicums, human rights practicums, and then kind of got recruited into government work. And I think what's important about that is, that realization that, advocacy was my home and my background and my heart. But that learning that I could do advocacy from inside government was really eye-opening to me. Working at the Department of Labor, I was able to really put forth a lot of policies and really quickly, to be honest, really quickly change policies within the first week. I made sure that we removed Social Security number as a prerequisite to file a wage claim for a minimum wage and overtime claims. And on from that, right? Because we were able to do so much in the short time that I was there. and was just really inspiring to me to see all the folks who are doing work inside government. Fast forward, went to the Cook County board and worked for, Congressman Chuy Garcia. Did some wonderful work around the ICE detainer. We were the first county and the first state of Illinois to prohibit local police from cooperating with ICE. That happened in 2007, I believe. I might have the wrong date, but that really set off a lot of what has become known as the sanctuary and welcoming city policies. And from there, I started on a path to join the Illinois Department of Human Services as a director of the welcoming centers, and was able to go back to the state to work with a lot of our organizations that are doing the good work, like ICER, like the Resurrection Project, and like Erie House and Association House, where I started. So I think those pivotal moments, using my experience as a child of an undocumented parent, and happy to say that my mom received her residency about 8 years after that, when I was in law school. And before I graduated, she was on her path to become a U.S. citizen and now has become a U.S. citizen. So obviously, it shouldn't take going to law school to have your family member become a U.S. citizen. But the more and more of us who are in this work in all these different roles, I think is going to uplift our community. So I think those are the most impressionable moments for me and kind of pivotal moments in the work that I do now as a legislator.
That's an awesome story. Thank you so much, Representative. Anyone else from the panel like to follow up? Moving forward to the next question, I would love to talk about policy and law, right? Our advocacy to impact. Representative Delgado, policy and law often move slowly while community needs are urgent. How do you balance patience with urgency?
Well, I think the short answer is that you don't. I think particularly in the time that we're in right now, um, even though sometimes policy itself moves a little bit more slowly, it's the urgency that keeps pushing us forward, right? So oftentimes we don't have the luxury of time. I think Rep. Jimenez had mentioned challenges with ICE and some of the work that she's done a tremendous amount of work in this space. And these were things that we had to just all in, put all the effort, find a way to make it happen, and do things to protect our communities when those things were happening on the ground in our neighborhoods. And so that was an example of us just pushing as hard as we could to try to make the machinery of government move faster. I think sometimes when we can see the iceberg coming ahead, and then we take time to really think through how we plan out that approach, right? So I think transit's a great example of that. We knew 6 years ago that transit was going to be reaching a point where it was going to need an infusion of capital, an infusion of revenue to be able to continue to operate the way we expect it to. And we were able to take time to really put the brain power into the policy discussion and putting together a lot of data behind why we wanted to do what we wanted to do. And because we had that time, I was able to work with my colleagues to be able to get all of them to understand why this was so important. And while that urgency existed over a number of years, that urgency was something that kept pushing us forward and pushing us forward. So I almost feel like they work in tandem. And even though sometimes it takes us a little time to be able to get a policy across the finish line, it's that urgency that keeps all of us returning day after day, leaving our families behind to go to Springfield and to spend hours and days together to make these things happen. It's because we feel that urgency back home. And I'm very lucky to work with a number of my colleagues, and we share the same passion to push these ideas and issues forward.
That's awesome. I appreciate your answer. I think it's very important to remember, the needs from the community and how they can help motivate policy and language that's moving through the state capitol. Do any other panelists would like to chime in, provide an answer?
I just wanted agree with that and share that it is so true that, you have to lay the groundwork at all times about things that you care about. And then look for those moments. Sometimes it's a quick moment that you have an opportunity. And if you're not prepared in that moment, you could lose that opportunity. I've learned that in the legislature specifically, that it's both, the patience and the urgency. So I really agree with the way you said that, Rep. Delgado.
Thank you, Representative Jimenez. Any other panelists? Awesome. So moving on to the next question, I'd love to bump over to Councilor Crespo. As Latina leaders in law and policy, how has your identity shaped both the barriers you faced and the way you lead today?
Well, I'll start by saying there are not many Latinos in the legal profession, and there are even fewer Latinas. I have seen the profession change over the past a little bit more than a decade that I've been involved, but immediately upon deciding to become a lawyer, I could feel and sense that there were things set up that are meant to keep people who look like you and me out of the profession, whether that be the prohibitive cost of going to college, which is a prerequisite before applying to law school, and then law school, the cost of sitting for a bar exam after you do the whole song and dance of going to law school and graduating, there's this other barrier. And while it is important for things like studying for exams, studying for the bar exam, rewiring your brain to be able to look at issues from a legal perspective with that very specialized lens is important. There's a lot of, excuse my language, BS that comes with that frankly we don't need. So what 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 my experience has done for me is given me a lot of empathy when I meet people, especially young lawyers, especially young female lawyers who are struggling to find their place as well as take care of themselves. People will use and abuse brown young lawyers who don't know how to prioritize themselves. And you need to be your first and foremost, you need to be your own advocate. So realizing what the barriers are. The barriers are the cost. The barriers are the just the male dominated field that has led to many instances of sexual harassment or intimidation. All of these things need to be constantly challenged. And because they have been constantly challenged by my fellow panelists, by me, by other people I recognize amongst the audience, it has changed. So the experience that I have has given me a lot of empathy. It's also given me a lot of hope because I have seen how intentional, concerted efforts to change a profession has resulted in actual change.
Thank you so much, Counselor. I think that's very important to recognize, and even as a law student now, right, it's very relevant being able just to also succeed in class, right, being able to stand out, and it's very important to keep pushing forward to dismantle these barriers. Would any other panelists like to follow up and answer that question?
I can jump in and give a little bit of my thoughts as well. I think they align with Jennifer's a lot. I mean, I remember studying for the bar and remembering that, this is my one chance, right? There's a lot of people that think, or others that are more privileged in the sense of, well, I can take it again. I didn't feel like I had that option, especially with the cost. The cost that I was incurring by not working, the cost that I was incurring by doing the bar prep, that investment was something that was purely for me, and I couldn't let that change. Like I couldn't lose that chance. And I think In the Latino community, I think a lot of us feel that pressure because it's the first time that many of us are doing it for our families or doing it for ourselves, however you want to see it, right? It's the first time that we're the ones facing that challenge. I remember actually Justice Reyes, whom I'm sure we all know, gave me two big pieces of advice when I was in law school. One was you train every day as if you're Rocky. So he's like, you go and you work out. Working out is huge for your mental health, making sure that you're balanced and you're ready for the day. Um, and number two was, you know, your families will sometimes not necessarily understand what you're going through. So you have to sit them down before or even during law school, right? Sit them down and let them know what you're going through so that way you avoid fights later on when they're like, hey, why can't you go to your cousin's baptism? Right? It's like, I can't go because I am investing these 3 months for this bar exam, or I am investing this time for this final that I have to. So having that open line of communication with our families is crucial for building that support system.
Thank you so much, counselor. That's super important, is being able to communicate that and just having that dialogue with families so they can understand from your first lived experiences, right, how important everything may be. Would any other panelists like to follow up? Awesome. Moving on to the next question, right? Sticking to advocacy and impact. Commissioner Rivera, the theme today is from advocacy to impact. Can you please share a moment when your work created real, tangible change?
Sure. And I'll start off with like the actual journey, right? Because we're talking about from advocacy to impact. And I entered law school to be an advocate, right? To really help out my community. I come from Waukegan, and it, there was very few Latinos out there, attorneys at that, right? So going into law school really with that as my um, guiding light was extremely important. I will tell you that being an advocate in that arena, uh, representing everything from just my local community to also local government to also doing immigration, really impacted how I saw legislation, right? Because that's what you're doing when you're advocacy. You're really like, you're arguing how legislation was written and why it's more favorable to your case. And from there, I made the decision to come back into government, really to impact not only policy and rules, but also the legislation, right? It gave me a platform to do that. And I learned in my time in government that sometimes it's not the legislation, sometimes it really is the internal policy. And sometimes it's just the rules that the agencies have in place that need to be expanded or need to be looked at again. So with that said, I can say that a lot going in, having that perspective of being a litigator, because I did that for 10 years, gave me the opportunity to really leverage my advocacy while being in state government. And I can say that some of the big things that I was able to do and assist with was modernizing state government when it came to the city of Chicago, right, with their voting. And also currently, I would say that as being a commissioner, the Commission on Equity and Inclusion, we've issued $1.63 billion worth of dollars that were spent to minorities, to women, to the disability arena, as well as veterans. So I can say that that also trickles down into your community, right? So not only am I assisting the businesses in providing them information as to how to contract with the state, but it also trickles down into your community and it really helps out and it creates generational wealth. And that is my biggest takeaway in my position.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Would everyone love to also share how they are able to impact tangible change within their own fields?
I'm going to jump in here and share a little bit about my own trajectory. So when I left law school, the first job that I got was actually working for the city of Chicago. So much like Maria's experience, I worked for Mayor Daley and spent a lot of time down in Springfield. And my job was to advocate for the people of the city of Chicago. And so every day you would go down there and you would encounter some issue or something that would somehow have a negative impact on those people that you represented, and you'd be scrambling to find a way to address it or to make sure that the legislators who were working that legislation understood what the impact was going to be in our communities. Um, I did that for a number of years, and then I went to go work for the Chicago Transit Authority doing the same kind of thing. And then at some point I said, I need to find a way to get out of government. I need an exit strategy into something else. And I ended up working for People's Gas, the natural gas delivery company in Chicago, and also learning a lot about that industry. And then the full circle moment comes back when I do decide to run for office. And I'm sitting in the room when we're negotiating one of the most consequential pieces of legislation on climate change in the country here in the state of Illinois, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, or CEJA. And I was sitting in this room and I was able to draw back on all of this experience and knowledge that I got from the gas company and say, oh, I understand these issues. I understand what these companies are doing. I know how we can help build policy that protects consumers. This is really amazing. Like you see these two things come together, right? Similarly, I mentioned transit already, but I worked for the CTA, and then we had this moment where we had a chance to make real transformational, consequential change for transit systems across the state. And I was able to say, I know this. I spent so much time in this industry. I know how to address some of these things. I see where the problems are, right? Or I see where these choke points are that we can fix. And so being able to take that experience, that lived experience that you had in whatever area it was, and being able to apply it to legislation that in turn changes people's lives. Like it's one of the most rewarding things about doing this work. But also, I don't think I ever knew that when I was in those jobs that someday it was all going to come back and be able to make the kind of impact that we're able to make in the General Assembly. And so I oftentimes in these kinds of settings, I will encourage people, even if ultimately you may want to be an elected official or ultimately you know what you really want to do, take some time to do those, veer off course a little bit sometimes because you never know how that experience is ultimately going to come back and give you the kind of um, and help you be even more effective in the work that you ultimately want to do.
Thank you so much, Representative. Anyone else like to contribute?
I um I love being a lawyer. It is probably one of the coolest things to be able to walk into a courtroom, appear before a judge on behalf of someone else. It's the first time I did that, I remember just feeling like, am I saying this the right way? Is my tone correct? And then you start to get a little bit more used to it. But in every aspect of my career, I can point to something that feels like, truly tangible change that I had a hand in helping realize when I practiced immigration law, when I was handling asylum cases, these uh, these really stunning, impactful stories of resilience that I heard from people who had been tortured, whose families had been murdered, slaughtered, who are fleeing countries that are their homes. Nobody wanted to leave their homes. And now to see them on their pathways to citizenship here in the United States and watching their love for this country develop, it was such an honor and a privilege to represent them in front of an immigration judge, in front of an asylum officer, and to help them find, well, asylum. To help somebody who has so much fear that it drove them into this treacherous path into my office, and to be able to meet them and hear from them, learn this other world, and then truly be the one who held their hand when they were scared during an asylum interview that lasts 3 hours, and they're getting grilled on these questions that seem to have really no rhyme or reason to how they're being asked. And then to see that ultimate result of being able to become a citizen here, I will never forget that feeling, and I carry it with me a lot. As a consumer protection attorney with the Attorney General's office, I was able to work with attorneys general across the nation, from red states and blue states. It didn't matter what side of the aisle a state was technically representing. When the attorneys got together in a concerted effort to address a consumer protection need, we did incredible things. We stopped opioid manufacturers, the folks making and distributing OxyContin, from calling on doctors, from advertising, because of the detrimental harm that was happening to communities. And that was something that we were able to do together collectively as a unified force. So even when you get disillusioned with red and blue and, this side and that side, if you pursue a legal profession, there's this silver lining of hope that you can come to terms with a lawyer who is looking at an issue the way that you are, and impact a field, an industry together. As general counsel of the Torture Commission, this is the best job that I've ever had. If this is what being a lawyer could be for the rest of my life, I don't know how I struck the jackpots and got to find. I found this in less than a decade of practicing. But we investigate claims that torture was used to coerce confessions, mostly to murders, and the people who go through the process of filing a claim with the Torture Commission, and if they get their claim referred to a judge, I've seen just, well, it's the ultimate, I wouldn't say happy ending, because there is no happiness surrounding somebody being tortured into confessing to a crime. But watching people who were not believed because they were young, Black and brown in the 80s and 90s, who now are having their stories heard, who are getting hearings and in front of a judge that now has the benefit of all the knowledge of the abuse that used to happen, watching them get retried and declared not guilty on all counts is real tangible change. You never make up for those years that were lost for that injustice. But nothing makes my skin crawl like somebody sitting behind bars because somebody with a gun and a badge and authority was able to put them there. So being a lawyer, working on these issues, having that passion, it's been so rewarding. If this is something that any of you are interested in doing, if you haven't embarked on the path yet, if you feel in your bones, like Commissioner Rivera said about being an advocate, do it. It is extremely rewarding.
Thank you so much, Counselor. I think it's super important to keep in mind, right, like why you do things, why you're here. And I can attest, again, just being in law school now, it's super rigorous. Getting inside, being able to do this work and even achieve the position that many of the panels here are in today, it takes a lot of hard work, but always being able to center yourself and remember why you're part of this path, right? And I think just to do a quick shift, right, I want to talk about power and representation. Councilor Martinez, once you enter spaces of power, the challenge shifts from access to transformation. What does it take to truly change systems from within? And what misconceptions about Latinas and leadership do you actively challenge?
When I saw this question come through, I was so excited. Because I get to give you my favorite metaphor. Having served in government for, I believe I did almost 10 years. I worked at Chicago Public Schools. I worked at the Secretary of State. I worked in the mayor's office. I Cook County Board of Review, the Illinois Senate. Within each of those jobs, I ended up leaving some kind of mark, and not because I wanted to. I think it's just because of how we function, right? I think when you're an immigrant, you have that go-getter mentality. It's ingrained in us. Um, and I think when I enter each of these spaces, and I would probably argue that the two spaces that had the most power for me were working in the Illinois Senate and working in the mayor's office, right? Because you are actively being the front lines of passing legislation that would affect millions of people in a very short time span. And something that I learned in those spaces is that you should take the time to learn those spaces before you try to reconfigure them. I always bring in a watch, right? A watch has how many million little pieces working together to make it function. And if you want to create or reconfigure it, or you want to have a whole new design, or you want to add a new gadget to it, you must understand how those pieces work together before you add anything else to it. And so I would say, yes, we should enter a lot of these spaces, which institutionally were not made for us to be in them, right? But we should leverage the existing institutional knowledge that are in these spaces and leverage them for our benefit. You get to learn so much from people that have been in these systems and, for better or for worse, have ingrained certain habits, right, that we may disagree or agree with. But if you understand them, then you're going to be able to not only talk to them, but also convince them that whatever you're bringing that's new to the table can work because you're approaching it from a perspective that they understand because you took the time to understand them. And so I really, really believe that to, challenge these spaces, we must learn first and break later, or reconfigure, however, whatever terminology we want to use, right? So, for example, I can give a quick example of something that I did in the mayor's office. We were lacking some historical information, right? And something about government, which whoever's already in government or has been in government knows that there are not a lot of resources at our fingertips, right? We make do with whatever is given to us. We do magic with almost nothing. And what I ended up creating was a system so that when legislation was coming down from Springfield, I was able to communicate with the corresponding departments immediately and created a system that would not only track their answers, but also have them be able to track what our actions were in Springfield. So there was always transparency between our team, the departments, and what we were doing to protect the city's interests down in Springfield. So that was something that had not been instituted. And I was on the Springfield team. For everybody that doesn't know, the IGA team in the mayor's office has three different teams. You have the state team, the city team, and the federal team. And I was mainly on the state team. And then the city team found out of what I had done, and they asked me to reinvent the same system for them. And that worked so fabulously to the point that we were getting feedback from departments saying, Maria, thank you. Or, hey, IGA, thank you for coming through and like communicating with us. So that eased the line of communication. I would also say, because I did take notes, hold on. For Latinas in leadership, we will all have encountered this at some point in our lives where we're going to be put into a box. Where because you are a Latina attorney, you must only do immigration, or that's the only thing you care about. And I feel like that puts us in such a constrained box, right? Because as a community, we care about immigration, right? However, I strongly believe that we can do that and break into other spaces that we are not traditionally in, especially when it comes to maybe, let's say, corporate attorneys, trademark attorneys, litigation attorneys. We are not in those spaces. And so when I say that you can do both, on my free time, I go and I volunteer for immigration. When it was the crisis that we had between 2023, 2024, that whole migrant crisis that we had here, I would go volunteer and I would go and spend my weekends filing asylum cases, filing for the permits, or what were they called? The TPS. I was spending time doing TPS. You can do that and break into spaces that you're not traditionally in. And I think as a community, we need to start shifting some of our focus or dividing our focus into going into spaces that we are not traditionally in so that we can continue to reimagine those so that people that come after us can continue to walk through that door. They don't have the same barriers that we have.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Would anyone else like to chip into the conversation?
I would just add that community is so important. I've learned so much from Maria Virginia, just by being in her circle and knowing some of the same people. If you are pursuing a legal profession, even when you're in law school, perhaps even before law school, look into the different bar associations in your community. There's a Hispanic lawyers bar, there's the Puerto Rican bar, there is the Chicago bar, the Illinois State bar. There's so many different groups, and when you find your community, one of the most beautiful things that I've witnessed is how we inspire one another to believe in ourselves, even if personally we don't believe in ourselves. Like right now, if somebody, a mentor in your community tells you, I think you should try doing this, or I think you have what it takes to apply for this position, lean into that. Lean into that. And the way that you show gratitude and thanks is by doing that for someone else when you're in a position, when you have that clarity and connection yourself of your own career and how you got there. But community is very, very important, especially for our people.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Any other panelists? Just to shift over to the last portion of this first section, right? I want to open this question to everyone here. This is regarding future in leadership. What is the most important truth you would like to share with students here today who want to lead in law, policy, or public service? This question is open to everyone, and I welcome your feedback.
I can take a quick stab at it. I would say nobody knows what they're doing. And I know that that sounds reductive. But if you guys knew how many people were faking it till they made it, if you knew how great you are and stopped going off of perception, I think that you would be unstoppable. I think that imposter syndrome is real. And it's something that is forced upon us in a way. But it's kind of like emperor's new clothes, right? You have to realize that the emperor has no clothes. The emperor has no clothes. And once you start approaching your career that way, you will question systems, you will push back against systems, and you will realize how prepared you are. And I'll put in another uh, pop culture mention. In Scandal, the show Scandal, there's this whole thing where Kerry Washington and her dad are facing off. And he tells her, how dare you think that the best thing you do is be first lady? I trained you to be better than this. And he says, I told you to be what? And she said, twice. She whispers, twice as good. And he said, twice as what? Twice as good to get half of what they got. And once you realize how much harder we're working than everybody else, you're going to realize that you deserve to be in those spaces just the same way that they do. That would probably be my number one thing.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Super powerful. I think that connects a lot with students, especially today, trying to navigate, the expenses and the lack of knowledge. Being first generation as well, it's very difficult trying to understand how to get into these spaces. And for most of the time, you're intimidated because you just don't think you belong, right? So that's super powerful. Any other panelists like to chime in?
Yeah, I would just say, I think grounding yourself in things that are important to you is really important from the beginning, of your career, all throughout your career. For some of us, it could be family. For some of us, could be, things that we like to do that help us, bring us peace and bring us joy. Rest is really important. All those different things that I think sometimes don't allow ourselves because we're trying to be twice as good. And I agree with that. A lot of times we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be twice as good. And it turns out, that you have like these wonderful panelists in front of you because, folks are so accomplished and have done the work. But also, we have to remember to allow ourselves to be human, and, allow ourselves to rest and take care of each other. It's sometimes easier to tell someone else to take care of themselves and to tell yourself that. So definitely, surround yourself with supportive people at every level. Folks that, they may not be taking the exact same path you're taking, but that, you can enjoy and enjoy each other's humanity and the work that you're doing together. And yeah, ground yourself in your community, because I think being part of a community of people who are working for a goal is, to me, part of what life is about. And I think a lot of what we see with the epidemic of loneliness, right? We don't want to feed too much into it and saying that like achievement is all that matters. Those of us on here, we've worked our butts off, we've sacrificed, and you may be doing that as well. But always look at the other end of it as well. Like, why are you doing it? What kind of world do you want to see? What kind of society do you want to see? What kind of people do you surround yourself with? Those are things I think are worth grounding yourself in, because when things get hard, you know that you're doing it for the right reason, that that you have, whoever it is, your family, your community, of support, either family that you have or family that you create, right? It's not to impose on anybody, but we have to make sure that, looking and organizing with your community is part of that. Being part of the work that's going on around you and not being separate from it is an important part of it. So I just encourage folks to do that, and to find ways to take care of yourself and each other. As I said, it's easier to tell somebody else to take care of themselves.
Thank you, Representative. And I believe shifting over, I don't know if any other panelists had anything else. Yeah, seems like it. I think that is a great way to kind of end that section, right? Representative, one of my favorite sayings from my mentor is rest is resistance, right? Because you're always pushing and striving to do more. And at the end of the day, you tend to forget about yourself, your health, your well-being, and trying to understand how to balance your priorities and your goals with everything that also revolves around you and your life. It's important to, trying to seek that balance. I appreciate your feedback. But shifting over, I think this is a great way to kind of talk into the audience questions. Before I start and before we open it to live questions, right? These are pre-recorded questions submitted from the audience when you signed up for this event. I want to acknowledge that many of you submitted very thoughtful questions when you received, the link for today's conversation. So we'll start with these pre-recorded questions and we'll open it up to a live Q&A. I've grouped them into diverse themes, so your voice is part of this conversation. These questions are open to everyone on the panel, so feel free to chime in whenever you like. But with that said, we'll begin with our first section. The first section is regarding barriers and resilience. So to everyone on the panel, as women of color in predominantly male spaces, what barriers have you faced and what challenges remain as of today?
I'll start by talking about some of the experiences I had outside of the legislature. So one of the beautiful things about the Illinois state legislature is that we're around 47% female. And in the House, in the House Democratic Caucus, women are actually the majority. So it's really amazing to be in a space where you have so many women there. Um, but I'm going to reflect back on some of my other experiences. When I was working in the utility company, I was very often the only woman and also the only person of color in any conversation. Um, and one of the things that was very difficult for me when I left government and went into the private sector was realizing that it really was a boys' club and that you would not get into the room or get invited to the conversation based on your merit. It was never going to work that way. And so, one of the things that I pushed back against in those spaces was the idea that just because I happen to look different than folks, or I come from a different background than folks, it didn't mean that I didn't know what I was talking about. And it's funny to go back to what Maria was talking about, thinking about Scandal. What a great show. Um, the idea that you belong in every room. That is something that my mother instilled in me very young. And every time I would have that voice in the back of my head, like, oh my gosh, you're about to walk into this space and everybody is going to look at you. It's like the needle goes off the record, right? When you walk into the room. And I would have to remind myself that I belong in every room and I have the skills to be in this conversation and I am going to open my mouth. And if people don't like it, then that's their problem, not mine. Um, and it probably took, um, at that time I was already, mid-career, right? But it took me a while to realize that I was going to have to kind of elbow my way into those spaces, because nobody was going to invite me. And then I actually got, I think, very lucky that there was a change in leadership at the company. And he was somebody who was a great, I mean, a mentor is one word, but an advocate for me in a lot of spaces. And I ended up getting invited into the operational side of the business instead of just the communications and the government relations side of the business. And I felt like somebody was finally seeing me, right? But I think that came after, 2 years of constantly elbowing my way into the room, and convincing myself that I belong there. So I think that that is something that if I were to tell my younger self, to trust in the experience and the knowledge that you have and believe that you belong in the room. Because oftentimes people will minimize you, they'll make you feel like you're less than, they'll make you feel like you don't have the experience. And the reality is, most of us, because we've been working twice as hard as everybody else, we have it. And we just need to force our way into those spaces.
Thank you so much, Representative. I think a nice way to segue over is, talk to a pre-law student. We had a question come in from a pre-law student asking, what advice would you give to a college freshman interested in public policy or public service? Again, this is for everyone on the panel.
If I can, and it's not even my place to pitch this, but there's a program in the state legislature that allows you to intern in Springfield. I believe it's ILLCF, Illinois State. It is such a great program. If you wanted to learn about policymaking and getting to be hands-on, I would say do that internship. It is an credible program. You are essentially treated as real staff. You are running around trying to figure out how much money you are going to allocate to different agencies. You're going to see the drama on the floor. You're going to see the chaos, but it is a beautiful chaos. And I would say try it, see it if you like it. Um, right now, whoever the student is incredibly, incredibly young, so you have the time to do it. And you have, I would argue, ILCEP is not, a lot of money, but when you're really young, you can make that kind of sacrifice. But that's my pitch.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Anyone else?
I'll also pitch our offices, or any legislative office. A lot of people think of Congress, but don't think of the State House. They don't think of their alder. It's a really great opportunity, especially if you can't get to Springfield. I have a wonderful district director that did ILCEP, and we're so lucky she did because she has so much knowledge that's irreplaceable for our office. But also, if you can't make the Springfield, because sometimes people, can't be away from home because they contribute to their family. I know folks personally who have that situation. You can always come to one of our offices. You can do even a short volunteer stint. You can do weekends. You can do a whole internship in the summer. I would encourage that. I wish I had that opportunity, that knowledge, that it was even an opportunity. And in addition to ILCEP, I would have loved to have done ILCEP. So please do take advantage and share with your friends as well. And just lastly, I think just the advice is if you're interested in this policy work, I would say do what you care about, do what you're interested in, follow those open doors that are open to you. You heard from a couple of us that we had different paths, but do something that you throw yourself into because your policy and legislative chops are going to be that much more strong, as you heard from Representative Delgado, no matter what you're doing. If you have deep experience in something, it's better if you're passionate about it, but also just walk through those doors. You never know what you might be passionate about in the future. So do all those internships. I know I did like 100 internships in law school and in undergrad. So I don't know if everybody has that bandwidth, but do as much as you can to figure out your path. But always believe in yourself and what you're interested in. And I think that's the heart of like how you gain your confidence, because it is a world, as was mentioned, that you get knocked down a lot. So you want to be grounded.
Thank you so much, Representative. I think, just to bounce off that, the next question was related to balance and real life, right? This is to everyone in the panel. How do you manage demanding careers while maintaining personal life and rest?
I'll start that one. You have to make it a priority. It's not as if you don't schedule, I have learned if you don't schedule it, it doesn't happen. You can be wishful about it, but you definitely have to schedule it in. And you have to do whatever, you have to find your joy, right? Some people will enjoy, let's say, Pilates or yoga or walking. Me, I enjoy music. I enjoy going to concerts. It's really what brings me joy, and it brings me balance as well. So definitely, making sure that you schedule it in, making sure that you're hanging out with people who really reinvigorate you as well, because this arena will um, drain you. I mean, it's hard work, and you definitely need to be around your people who are really going to reinvigorate you on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else from the panel?
I was going to jump in and say that sometimes that balance is really hard to find. I I, I think I said in another panel earlier this year that I was really bad at being a mother and a wife last year because I was putting so much effort into a legislative project that just took everything that I had to get it across the finish line. But then after it was over, to Eddie's point, said, I am going to take time away from this and I'm going to give myself that space to recuperate and to be with my family and to spend time doing the things that reinvigorate me to do this work again. I think sometimes, particularly as women, we have this expectation of ourselves that we can do everything and that we can do it all at the same time and we can do it all amazingly. And we put that expectation on ourselves. And sometimes we have to give ourselves the grace to say, I'm going to do this one thing and I'm going to do it really well. And maybe these other things are not going to be as great, but as long as I'm being honest about what I can and can't do, then at least I feel like I've done everything that I can and recognizing that there's always going to be that trade-off. Um, and it's taken me a really long time to get to this point in my life to be able to say that because I think for a long time, not doing it all and trying to do it all really well was I thought of it as a failure. But I now see that you have to be able to give yourself that grace. And I might be the oldest of all of our panelists today, so I feel like I have that lived experience that I could talk about.
Thank you so much, Representative. Anyone else from the panel?
Yeah, I would agree. I think I have to keep reminding myself that we continue to pass the baton to each other. That you don't have to be, the lead on every issue. You don't have to be up every night working on everything that you care about. You have to surround yourself with other people who are doing good work, and support them. And knowing, like, Rep. Delgado was talking about her transportation work, right? Me knowing that she was working on that transportation work was lifted, huge weight off my shoulders because my community was prioritizing this issue as well, since we have shared communities. Knowing that somebody from the community was working on it, that somebody had the knowledge and the commitment and the dedication, was amazing to see. And then in the meantime, I was working with a whole group of folks working on an immigration omnibus bill that I'm really, really proud that we did. It had the support of all the Latino caucus, and so many of us worked on it. And it was a 5-piece project, and I worked on 2 pieces, and other folks worked on other pieces. And so we were able to pass the baton that way. Sharing the workload is really important. But in order to do that, you have to surround yourself with the right people. You have to support the right people. You have to open doors for people who you think will do this work well. You have to create space and create space for them, allow space for them, like be a real friend, be a real colleague, so that you can all be successful together. We were able to work on this immigration omnibus bill, which made us the first state in the country to create a private right of action to sue the federal government for constitutional violations, right? For individual constitutional violations of our rights. There's 5 other states who have done it now. There's many other states that are trying to do it. We were able to, make sure that immigration is not at our hospitals, not at our daycare centers, not in our schools. Our courts. I'm probably missing 1 or 2, but we did that not, as one person, Lilian Jimenez or Rep. Delgado, but we did that as a Latino caucus. And passing the baton is so important. I was able to be able to go home to my son. When I started this work, he was 4 years old. He's 7 now. And I think about that a lot, right? The amount of hours that I've been away from him. And so I do spend a lot of time making sure that I block off time just to spend with him and just to make sure that I also speak to him about these issues so he knows very clearly what his mom is doing and why I'm doing it. And he can tell you in his 7-year-old version, he can tell you about the bills that I've passed because we have that ongoing conversation because I don't want to create like a unnecessary division between life and work. And so I think that's another piece of it, making sure there's some unity there so that, we can feel at peace and at calm when we say we're not, in this moment, I'm not working on this issue and I'm passing the baton to someone who is.
Thank you so much, Representative. I think we can shift to an interesting conversation, right? Here, speaking about law school and career prep. We have 2 questions. First one being, and I have to do a shameless plug, I'm sorry, everybody, but the first one being, are there scholarships or financial resources you recommend, right? So I would love to first give a second to Liz to speak about our scholarship for the Latino Caucus Foundation. So if you want to maybe chime in for just one quick second.
I'll be quick. Yes, I'm a product of the scholarship, and so is Felix. In May, the scholarship will be opening up, and it's $5,000. It is open to both vocational tech, undergraduate, graduate students now as well. So I'll be including the link. Please take a time. This is $5,000. Once you receive it, you can no longer receive it. And we would like for you to be part and an integral member of our Alumni Association. So I'm so grateful that it's open to graduate students who really do need the support as well.
Definitely goes a long way. Thank you, Liz. But anyone from the panel, are there any resources or scholarships that helped you when you were in law school?
So I'm gonna see if I can put this in the chat as well. But in addition to ILLCF, there are organizations that specifically have scholarships for law school or the LSAT exam, scholarships for prepping for the bar exam. I mentioned HLAI already. That's the Hispanic Lawyers Bar Association. The Diversity Scholarship Foundation, which is led by Justice Jesse Reyes, also provides scholarships to college students who are interested in preparing for the LSAT, as well as current law students who are getting ready to study for the bar exam. As some of our panelists mentioned, studying for the bar exam is itself it's a sprint. It's a full-time sprint gig. 3 months, all you do, sunrise to sundown, is studying, memorizing, and it's very difficult to do that and balance relationships and self-care and then work if you need to be able to earn money to pay for the expensive bar exam. So there are, again, I have mentioned different bar associations, and there are ones that aren't specific to affinity groups, but are open to anybody to apply as well.
Thank you, Counselor. Anyone else?
I just mentioned
I think,
that the
yes.
Chicago Bar Association has some opportunities. I got a scholarship from them, and PRBA, you might have mentioned that one, Jennifer. I know you mentioned a couple. I got a PRBA one, which I was really thankful because it wasn't required that you had to have the highest academic scores. So that was helpful for me because they really those two that I received were more focused on experience. And, you know, when I was going into law school, I had 8 years of experience and I didn't have my academics, you know, where I wanted them to be. So that was really helpful. There's a wide range of different opportunities.
Thank you so much, Representative. And I think this is a good shift. Now we have another question from a pre-law student. What resources supported you during your LSAT or again, law school? So any feedback there from our panelists?
Wait, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. One of the pre-law students asked, what resources supported you during LSAT or law school?
During law school, being a member of the Latino Law Students Association was incredibly helpful. So a lot of these groups within law school, they kind of create this little outline bank. So if your grades were B or higher on a final in law school, you can turn in or volunteer to share your outline that helped you study. And those associations will then just kind of create folders and share them with students when they ask, once they're members of the association. I think that was incredibly helpful. I was lucky to also develop a really close friendship with Professor Acevedo. And I call it John Marshall, and I know everybody calls it UIC, but I paid private school tuition, and my law school says John Marshall. So, but Professor Acevedo was instrumental in creating a space for me where he understood my origins, my background, and I didn't feel as though because sometimes I feel like when we look for support, we're seen as like, and maybe sometimes it's people taking pity instead of saying, "Hey, I'm going to support you because this is what you deserve." He didn't like look down on me. It didn't feel like he was doing it out of like obligation. It was because he genuinely wanted to. And developing that relationship with him was incredibly helpful to me. I would go to his office to ask for help on other subjects. He really, really went out of his way for me. And I think that was helpful to me, finding a professor that was also Latino who has lived experience and um, was willing to support. I think that that was uh, probably the number one thing for me.
Thank you so much, counselor. Anyone else? Any help with LSAT prep or law school? Any resources?
This is Commissioner Rivera. I would have to say that for me, in addition to HLAI and LASA, my professors, I went to DePaul, my professors were very um, helpful, right? And so making sure that I was going and seeing them, making sure they knew who I was, seeing them in their office hours really assisted me because whenever I felt like I didn't really understand. I couldn't grasp what was happening in class. They were able to break it down for me even more, or even in a more tangible way. And I'll use this as an example. Contracts, I couldn't understand it for the life of me. The professor had to come in and bring me a real estate contract. I was like, this is the offer. This is like really broke it down for me in like, paper, right? And that once that happened, it just clicked. And the other thing is, I don't know about the other schools, but at DePaul they give you a mentor when you first come in, and my mentor happens to be Judge Tristan now, and so like building that relationship with him, my first year in law school all the way through now, has really helped. Right, he's always been a mentor, so definitely like leverage everything that's given to you while you're in law school.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And I think just to finish up here, one of the last questions that we received that are here pre-recorded is regarding civic engagement, right? We all spoke about how busy schedules can be, how to manage time and wellness. One of the questions came in saying, how can students engage in policy with limited time? Any suggestions from our panelists?
I like that question. I don't think I've ever received that question before, but I think there's a lot of opportunities. If you start thinking about everything in your life, about problems that you see, things that barriers that are around, and you see a connection for example, state or even city regulations, laws. Just dropping an email to your legislator about an issue, you never know, could become something that somebody can take up. A lot of us are always looking for constituent-driven ideas for legislation. So that's one thing that I wish more people knew for sure. That if a constituent brings me something, I will work really hard to see if there is a resolution. And if there is not something already a current solution to something, look to making a state law on it. So if everybody would think that way in their everyday work, whatever experience you bring to the question, you could definitely make a huge impact. My district director had an issue that she brought to me, and together we worked the bill, and we changed state law to increase health insurance access for a specific condition. So you never know where your idea is going to go.
Thank you so much, Representative. Anyone else?
I'm gonna second that. And I was I was just looking back into some of my old stuff from when I was in law school, and I had written a paper about gentrification. This was back in 2002. And I think about that kind of stuff. Like if you're producing something in class that might have a policy driven, like the prompt is policy driven, or a solution you have come up with is policy driven. If it's something that you have spent time doing research on and putting together solution driven ideas, send that to your legislator. I think that again, it's something that you may have already done as a part of working class, and it gives us an idea to actually go and take action on. And sometimes you all come with a different perspective and a different lens on things, and that helps um, drive us in different directions that maybe we hadn't thought of ourselves. So, I mean, and that may not take much time at all if you've already put in the work and then just share it with us. That would be amazing.
Thank you so much, Representative.
This is Commissioner Rivera, just to jump in with Representative Delgado. Uh, you're the consumer when you are in law school. So you're going to have city council where you can participate in. You're gonna have fellowships like the Sullivan Fellow. I was an International Human Rights Fellow, and PILI, the Public Interest Law. And you're gonna also be given opportunities to write, like law journals, and as well as law review. So definitely take those opportunities to write and research and do all the things. And definitely, if it's something that you feel that your local elected official should be reading or seeing, provide it to them. They are very open to that, and they have websites that you can reach out to them for, and definitely like utilize and leverage the fact that you are in law school, that you have that time to do that, and provide it to the individuals that really can take it and maybe even run with it.
Thank you so much, Commissioner.
I would just add that it's time is always something I don't know where, even this panel today, I don't know where that hour and a half went. But don't forget that part of being involved in policy or preparing to leave your own mark on policy, depending on the work, part of that is curiosity and learning. And even when you feel pressed for time, you don't have anything you can do besides law school because it is a full-time job unless you're attending as an evening or part-time student. But study the topics that interest you. Do specialized classes like legislative drafting, for example, and take up your professor's offers to look into areas that interest you. Even if there's not a wealth of information available yet, even if you're just making it up from scratch, start to pull those threads together and just stay curious and treasure that aspect of who you are and your willingness to learn. That's so important for being able to speak with other people now or in the future about change that you want to see.
Thank you so much, Counselor. In the sake of time, we're going to shift over to live Q&A. For any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. There are a couple here ready to go. So I can start with one that's already here. But to all our panelists, one question we have from Patricia is, for those of us who don't believe in, for those of us who believe in the work you're doing but aren't directly in your district or offices, I believe it's related to elected officials, how can we show up in ways that can support you?
There are so many different ways that you can plug in with not only our offices, but also the offices where you happen to reside. So while it's amazing that you may agree with us and some of the policies that we're putting forward, coming and volunteering in our offices or spending some time even coming out for a weekend and doing some door knocking. And I mean, absolutely we do this on the policy state side. I'm out knocking on doors talking about just what's happening in the state and how we can serve other people. So that's always an option. But if you don't happen to live in our districts, that doesn't mean that you can't engage with the state representative that represents you. And actually, I like to encourage folks to have that connection with their local state representative or state senator, because that means that they need to be paying attention to you as a constituent. And if these are issues that are important to you, it should also be important to them. So, kind of a two-part answer. We're always happy to take anybody who would like to offer support. I mean, you could do very little or you could do a whole lot, but make sure you're also tapping the shoulder of that elected person that represents you.
Thank you, Representative. Anyone else?
There is
Right before I jump to
another
the other.
question.
Oh,
There is
yes.
it says, and
Go
I
ahead,
don't
Liz.
know if Carlos wants to ask it himself. Well, it says, how can you sell yourself as a pre-law student? I've reached out to a few legal aid offices, and I think it's been difficult to demonstrate your value as a student. Oh, sorry, I lost the chat here. I don't know if
I can
Carlos,
jump
if
off
you,
if you want, Liz. So jumping off of Isela's question, how can you sell yourself as a pre-law student? I reached out to a few legal aid offices, and I think it's difficult to demonstrate your value as a student with little to no law experience. So any suggestions how to sell themselves as a pre-law student with little experience, law experience?
I would probably say just sell yourself as a college student. I know that pre-law means a lot to us when we're in undergrad, but for legal aid, they're looking for students who are mainly in law school. So if you want to go in as pre-law, just sell yourself as a college student and say, hey, I'm just looking to volunteer. How can I help? Even if it's just making copies, even if it's just writing out applications, helping out with the simple tasks. I think you would probably be a little bit more successful by doing that. And then once you're in, because it's just about getting your foot in the door, right? Once you're in, then you can say, hey, I actually was thinking about this, or hey, maybe we can make this system better. But I think right now, when you're in undergrad, you're going to be seen as a college student, regardless of, the designation of pre-law. So just go in as a volunteer. Don't stress out because they won't take you as a pre-law student. Just say, I'm college and I'm here to volunteer. How can I help?
And I would remind folks too that we have a lot of legal nonprofits and nonprofit agencies that now have a legal office. That's a lot due to the situation that we're in right now with immigration, but there's also a project called the Access to Justice Project that has state funding for a lot of different types of legal work that is community based. So take a look at the Access to Justice page for all the different organizations. Go through there. I would recommend maybe going to some of those nonprofits. They may only have one lawyer on staff or Board of Immigration Appeals folks. But take a look there and volunteer. That might be another area to volunteer if the larger legal nonprofits are not responding.
Thank you to both. Before I jump to the next question, I did want to highlight the comment from Dora. I've been to this event before, the Illinois Latino Law Student Association event here at DePaul Law. It is phenomenal. It hosts panels for students for pre-law students who are pursuing law school. It hosts panels with law students, with practicing attorneys, with professors. They raffle off some LSAT prep courses for free. So definitely check it out. I think this is an awesome opportunity. And I think another question we have here from Kenneth is for the panel. I work for the City Colleges of Chicago, and I have seen a lot of students who want to participate more in civics or even transfer to a law school, but they are afraid because of the cost or lack of representation. How can we create a network for people to volunteer or get in coaching? But Latinos represent less than 5% of lawyers. Anyone else from the panel?
Well, a lot of it is, we're doing some of that right now by having this cafecito, as you can see from the chats out, our representatives on the panel have put their contact information in the chat. So it's things like this. I I'll be honest with you. It's a tough profession. Law school is not for the faint of heart. Um, I don't know that I would want to repeat law school or the bar exam. Yeah, I like, been there, done that, got the t-shirt kind of a thing. But again, finding that community is important. So it's moments like this. It's reaching out to ILLCF again in the future, finding out about different events. Latino Unity Day is coming up in May. There are buses that will take people from Chicago and I think Bolingbrook on May 6th, drive them to Springfield and bring them back. And at an experience like that, you get to interface with a lot of elected officials, community leaders, and different activists. But when there are these conferences and these opportunities to gather, I strongly recommend taking advantage of that. And if there are barriers like transportation, meeting that head on and letting the event organizers know, hey, this is cost prohibitive, or I don't know how I'm going to get my people there. Do you have any ideas or solutions? But creating these spaces and then getting people through the door, exchanging contact information like we are today is what's going to help everybody. So that's a job for all of us. I don't know if it's ever going to stop, at least not anytime soon. The profession and and law school itself are changing, but it's incumbent upon us all. So you're seeing it right now. What I would recommend to students who are afraid of the cost of the lack of representation. I don't share this story too much, but before I went to John Marshall, now UIC, I had close to a full ride at a different law school. But after a traumatic experience, I found myself in another nightmare, which was being in that bottom 10% of law students who get academically dismissed and then get put on a 2-year waiting period before they can re-enter law school. And I leaned into the people who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, who walked me to John Marshall, to the dean's office there, and encouraged me to just keep at it and just get back into it and take any opportunity that I could. It is difficult. It is expensive. And I felt very much not represented or seen, and I felt ashamed. But that Latino Law Student Association that was at John Marshall became my community. And then I started to create communities for other people because I started to understand that, hey, I'm not incapable of becoming a lawyer. I did it. I'm doing it. You can do it. It is expensive. I'm still in debt. And yes, it's scary, but I have a plan. Um, I think I have a plan. I know we're still in a certain federal administration that could do certain things with student loan forgiveness, but finding that community and then encouraging others to help one another has really helped. So that's how we get ourselves coached. That's how we coach one another. That's how we increase the percentage of Latinos in the legal profession. And even if we feel like we haven't broken through just yet, even our interest in attempts to enter into this profession will change it.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Just such a powerful story, and I think that's, a great way to close this off. Keep being mindful of time. I think people need to kind of like sit and think about the idea of how to reflect on what we've heard today, right? It's the fact that leadership is not one path. It can take shape through law, policy, advocacy, or public service, but at its core, it's about using your voice to create change beyond yourself. To our panelists, thank you so much for your leadership and insight. To the students here today, and the path may not be linear, but as you've heard from panelists and everything that they shared, it is meaningful and is very much needed in our community. Thank you for being part of this conversation. And just to close this off, I would love to throw it over to Liz to just finish the program for today.
Well, thank you very much. I definitely feel very inspired. I feel reinvigorated to hear from such powerful women and their voices and their story, which I think reflects each and one of us. But I also wanted to share briefly how this came about, this cafecito. It began with a conversation between alumni members of ILCEF of the need of this, and then we talked to other community and other students. So that's where the conversation was created for this cafecito. Just wanted to give you some background. But I want to thank everyone today, especially Felix, who helped us moderate just a powerful panel discussion. We also want to thank you all for taking time of your day and joining us, but we want to hope that we would like for you to stay connected for the upcoming events that we have. We have the Charla en Chisme con nuestros legisladores on May 1st at noon, which will be highlighting and having a conversation with Representative Barbara Hernandez, an ILCEF board member and alumna of herself. Also, we have an upcoming cafecito on May 21st at 12:30, Building Pathways, Latinx Employment, and IASE Advocacy, featuring Diane Casas, President of IASE, and Carlos Charneco, Chairman of the Hispanic Employment Council. Again, thank you all for attending, and may you have a wonderful afternoon.